Hey Dan, good to have you on. Finally, we have our conversation, our interview scheduled. I'm excited to have you tell us a little bit about your business and some of the results that you've been getting, but warm welcome. Let me start off with that.
Well, thanks, Dan. I appreciate you chatting with me and giving me a chance to answer whatever I can help with, however I can answer your questions. So I'm happy to do this. It's great.
Excellent. So maybe we start off with you. You know, you have a very interesting background and you're involved in different types of businesses. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do and who you are?
Sure. I'll try the short version.
Yeah, yeah. Otherwise, it'll be an
I've
interview about only your background.
yeah. So I've been involved in the fixed income and structured finance market for well over 30 years now, and I've got pretty broad, varied experience. I've been in mortgage origination, underwriting, servicing, mortgage banking, and I have a lot of expertise on asset-backed securities, mortgage-backed securities, commercial mortgage-backed securities, CDOs and CLOs, REITs. I was the chief investment officer of a real estate investment trust. That's what a REIT is. And I've been involved in the structured finance market since the beginning. I actually worked on one of the first deals ever done in the mid 80s and developed the market from scratch along with a number of other people, but I was one of the original people involved in the market. And I've had a chance to, like I said, I've worked for rating agencies. I chaired the rating committees at one of them. I ran a broker-dealer research department at Merrill Lynch for like 14 years for them globally, and was responsible for all the research on all those products. I went to the buy side at one point, meaning I was an investor. So I was a collateral manager, a portfolio manager. I've been the research analyst, all of those things. So I've seen the market from just every perspective that's out there. And back in starting around 2007, 2008, I got my first call to do an expert witness work. A lawyer I knew called me up and said they needed an expert witness. I'm like, well, that's great. What is that? And he said what they needed. And he goes, you're like the second biggest CDO manager out there right now. And you know it inside out. And we need somebody that can explain it to anybody and do that. And I know you can do it. And I'm like, oh, well, okay, I'll try it. And turns out I was, pretty good at it. So I started doing that. And then when a couple of years later, when after the financial crisis, when the job I was in was going to end just because of the crisis and business was slowing down, I started doing more cases, and I ended up doing it for now the last 15 years or so. So I do the expert witness work, but I also over time started doing consulting work. And sometimes it started out with easy stuff like just doing valuations on hard to value securities, which actually isn't that easy, but there are not a lot of people who do it. And sometimes the broker dealers don't want to do it. So I started doing that. And then people started calling me and like, I need help on due diligence. I need help on writing some credit underwriting guidelines, and I've been involved in that for a long time. And, like currently I've got a project in the fintech space with one of the financial technology firms. So it's led to other things. And, so I do a lot of things. And in the background, I also co-manage an investment fund that invests in what they call PACE asset, which is a property assessed clean energy, which is probably the only ESG asset in the fixed income space. Everything else that's considered ESG is in the equity space. So everybody wants those assets. So I'm in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, you definitely are
on that one. So so that's interesting. But it keeps me
you busy, right?
Busy and interested, and all those things relate to each other in different ways. We can get into that if you want a little bit later. But
definitely, I think that's interesting.
Yeah, but that's like sort of the the big picture, I don't want to go through all the jobs and different things, but I think suffice it to say, I've literally been on the buy side, the sell side, the research and the rating agency side, and there really isn't an aspect of the business I haven't seen from a different perspective, and I think that's the thing, especially for on both the expert witness side and on the consulting side, is having had multiple perspectives.
Mm.
Like if I see a case, I know exactly what the other side's going to do, because most of the time I say, I could do the other side of this case if I was asked to, but because I know what the other side's going to do, so I can counter that. Because I know if I'm on the other side, this is what I would do, because I've been in the position, and I know how the portfolio manager thinks, I know how the issuer thinks, I know how the third parties like the rating agencies thinks, because I've had all those positions. So
Yeah.
it's a huge advantage over most people, because not to say that other people's experience isn't great, but mostly you'll get somebody that has done something for the past 20 or 30 years, and they're perfect on that perspective, but they don't always understand all the other perspectives, and sometimes that trips them up. And I
Yeah.
don't have to worry about that so much. So
That's really great. Thanks, Dan, for that background. I think we could have, probably a full 25-minute interview on your background, because it really is interesting, but I'm containing myself from asking you more questions. The second question would obviously be, how come you and I got in touch and started working together? What was on your mind, and what were you hoping to achieve?
well, I think it was a couple things. One, like I said, I have a lot of different perspectives, but one that I don't have fully developed is I don't think like a salesman does, although I've had that job even for a little bit, but
Mm.
that was never my niche, if you will. And and I've never been big on like, how do I promote my business? How do I do that? And I was looking around and I saw some of your stuff, and I said, well, this guy seems to know what he's doing. So let's see if I can get his perspective and maybe learn, like, how can I market myself better? I've always had enough business, but you get these lulls now and then. I'm
Mm.
like, well, let's see, is there a way to avoid the lulls, so that I'm always busy, that I always have multiple things to do. I want to be in a position where I sometimes have to turn things down, not where I'm looking like what's going to be the next thing, because you never know. I mean, that's part of the issue with being, like, especially on the expert witness side, is you could work on something for months, weeks, whatever, and then one day the lawyer calls you and says, "Hey, we settled, we're done," and
Yeah.
you think you've got another 3 months to go, and you're done, and the paycheck stops immediately. So you need to have multiple things going on in the background, especially on the expert witness side. I mean, the
Mm.
consulting is more consistent, because you know the link to the project, or if it gets extended, or if there's other things you can do, you can suggest them. But you have to do excellent work to start if they're going to ask you to do more things. So you have to, continue down that path.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to get that different perspective, and sort of be more cognizant of, like, how do I promote the business, and how do I recognize opportunities, because they've always been there, but I don't always see them because I wasn't paying attention. Now I pay a lot more attention than I used to,
Yeah.
and I've always used old contacts and people I've done work for in the past as referrals to get other things, but now I remind them once in a while. And I did that earlier this year. I reminded some people, like, hey, I still do this, because they see that I'm running this fund, and they think, oh, so I thought maybe you're not spending as much time on that. Like, well, I spend less time on it, but I'm still spending time on it, and I'm also doing consulting, and just want to let you know I'm still doing all this stuff. So if you need a witness, if you need a consultant, or if you just want to talk about the markets, I'm around, and
Yeah.
I can help. And then, surprisingly, a lot of people were very responsive to that. They're like, you know what, hadn't thought about you in a while, but there's some things you can help us on, based on past work. So, and now I see that, and now it's just easier for me, when I do talk to somebody, I use it as an opportunity just to let them know that, I'm still working on multiple things, and there's always time to fit in something else.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
sometimes people think, well, he's probably too busy, but well, let's talk, because and even sometimes the work is just interesting and you want to do it, just because it's interesting, or I'm going to learn something a little bit different that I haven't learned before, because every job is out also a learning opportunity. So you want to, take that opportunity to do it. But if you're not out there and doing things, then you may not get that opportunity. So
yeah.
and I think that's one of the things that it's been helpful talking to you about.
Yeah, I think that's the topic that I definitely would want to just touch a little bit more on. But yeah, I completely agree. Like what ended up happening with our work was that you made that initial effort and and got business immediately from it. So then
Yeah,
then
yeah.
you got incredibly busy with everything that was going on. But I guess that's the way it is. Sometimes you get a little bit more than you want to.
Yeah, well, it's fine. I think I've had to focus more on things that, I always had the ability to juggle multiple jobs at once and multiple tasks, different projects, whether they be consulting or expert witness work or whatever. But now it's sort of like, okay, instead of having three balls in the air, there's five or six, and you've got to keep
Yeah,
them all going. You don't want anything to hit the ground or to slow down. And, I've always been highly organized. I will always, that's been one of my rules from the very start, even before I did any of this work, is even when I just had a regular job, working on Wall Street or whatever, I'd never end a day without at least attempting to call everybody back that called me
mm,
or respond to the email or whatever. And sometimes you can't get to all of them, but then in that case, you just say, very tied up right now, whatever, I will come to you back tomorrow or whatever. But
mm,
you don't want people to think you've blown them off, or I think the word the young people use, that you ghost them, you know.
precisely.
Yeah, and it's like, no, I want you to know that everybody that I work with or for is important,
Mm.
and I am paying attention, even though I can be really busy sometimes. I'm always going to call you back, because everybody's got something. If they called you, they need something. It might be a minor thing, it might be a big thing, but I don't know until I get back to you. So I've got to get back to you to figure out what it is.
Yeah, I think you're
Because
absolutely right. Like
yeah,
responsiveness and communication, like people always appreciate that.
yeah,
Because they don't know, right? Maybe they're used to you getting back the same day, and then they don't hear from you, and they don't know how to interpret that. Maybe you're not interested, maybe you're too busy, but your intention is actually to get back to them the day after, and just a simple message will be the communication that they need to know that you're still the usual Dan.
yeah,
I'm a bit curious, Dan. You are you're really good at helping people out, and I think that is your extensive network is really a result of that. You do not have only yourself in mind when you interact with people, and I think that unselfish approach is really helpful uh, when it comes to cultivating a large network. So you will get on the phone with people and try to help out, and maybe it's not always the easy answer. Maybe you're not always able to help, but maybe you can point them in the right direction. So what are your thoughts on that? Why do you do that?
well, I think there's several things, and I think it's one of those things I got into a habit like early in my career. And then and I did, like when I was on Wall Street, I did very well very fast, and I got into a senior job at a relatively young age. And and there's all these junior people, these new MBAs and new people, and they're all very bright, but they don't. It's hard to say that they're bright, but they don't know anything. But that's kind of true. They're very smart, but they don't know how in practical terms how things work and what you have to
Mm,
do to get things done, and they need help. And so even even at a young age, even starting in my 20s, like I would these younger folks would come and they want to learn stuff, and a lot of the senior guys would just blow them off. Go and talk to this guy. He's more your level. He'll get you to the next level. And I always thought, I'm going to help them out. And one, because I should, and if I help them, they're going to help me, be better, because half of them work for me. But the other thing is, I knew even back then that, you help them out now. They might be junior people now, but they're going to be more senior. And at some point, they might be very senior.
Mm.
And it's true. I know people from 20 or 30 years ago that I was the guy that helped them get to the next step. And now they're, very senior or running a company or whatever. And they call me out like, you're the guy that helped me when nobody else would help me. And now I need some help and I can pay you well to help me. So you're the guy I'm going to call.
Yeah.
And they refer me to their friends. And when they say, this is the guy that helped me when I was young and nobody else would help me out. And now, and he can still help. So, so I get involved. So I get a lot of referrals from people like that I've helped when they were young in their career or they needed to learn something. And, and the other thing is, I think that's a differentiating factor with a lot of experts is a lot of them, they're all smart. They all know their business really well, but not all of them can explain things in plain terms, in simple terms. I won't name anybody, but I can think of 3 or 4 people that have, multiple PhDs and they're brilliant and they can explain like really complex, detailed stuff. And when they're talking to other people of their ilk that are really smart and very well educated and everything like that, they do really fine. But then they talk to somebody that doesn't have their background
Mm.
and they have trouble. And, and I told one of them, I said, and I was trying to be helpful, I said, you don't really know your stuff as well as you know it until you can explain it to like a 5th grader or a 6th grader. So
Yeah.
you don't do it. And even sometimes, even if you get to like a trial in one of these cases and you've got a judge and you've got to explain things to a judge sometimes, and they don't know what you know. So you have to explain it where you have to figure out where they are and then go there
Mm.
and then explain it there. And then they appreciate that, because you don't want to throw a bunch of technical jargon and terms at them or whatever. And just plain English. If you can do plain English, you're so far ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think another thing that I wanted to sort of go circle back on that you mentioned, and maybe, I'll start with my view on this because I think you share it. We will get questions from potential clients and people that we speak with on, I'm an expert witness. I'm based in this or that city. I'm based in this or that country. Will this work for me? And then maybe we'll speak to a consultant, and they will say, I'm specialized in economic or financial type of consulting, or they will be focused on some other type of business consulting. Will this kind of system work for me? And my answer is always, if you're providing these kind of sophisticated services where relationships and connecting with the right people matter, then it doesn't really matter what you do or where you're based. What we work on works. And you sort of alluded to what I think is that earlier on in the conversation where you said that you do a lot of different things, but there are actually quite a lot of similarities between them. So
yeah, it's the geography is not a barrier to anything anymore. Sometimes time zones are a barrier. Yeah.
And tell me, what are your thoughts on like the tangents between consulting and expert work? Because I think you're able to pick up, a little bit of both by doing both of those types of providing both of those services, right?
Yeah, no, I think actually, initially I didn't really link the two as much as I do now, but now I see they kind of feed off of each other because sometimes the legal clients, sometimes there's things they need that aren't like a case, but they need
Mm.
information or they need help. And, I've got a lot of expertise on several things. So sometimes they'll call them like, I don't need an expert, but I need your expertise. I need, I don't
Mm.
need you I need this background so I can get this other stuff done. And yeah, I can do that. So sometimes the expert work leads to that. More often than not, sometimes I've done expert work for people but they do a lot of other things. And it's not always legal matters because, you end up usually working on behalf of a company somewhere, like the law firm hires you, but you're working for, they're working for a client, and that client sees like, wow, you know about this, and this. Well, and they call me up and say, well, I need some help on a business matter, but it's something that you know about, and I know from the legal work you've done for us, and I think you can help us. So do you do that? And that's one of the reasons why I started doing consulting. And it's like,
Mm,
so one feeds the other. And the other thing is with like the legal work, you're working on something very specific and everything, but on the consulting, you're usually working on new stuff, cutting edge stuff, new things, new innovations or new developments, new technology or new other ways of doing things. So you get on the cutting edge and you're learning and
mm.
you're keeping up with things, and you're usually ahead of other folks that are just doing their everyday job.
And one thing that I also wanted to ask you is, many experts tend to only rely on obtaining cases from different kinds of agencies, platforms, directories, and so on. And what I find is that they rarely get sufficient amount of cases or any cases at all. And just looking at your business, you're leveraging the full potential of those types of channels, but you're also getting direct business through your own network and relationships. And what's your view on that?
Yeah, well, I think it's right. I think actually early on, I did get plenty of work from those traditional channels, and plenty. But then, you started to get these lulls, and then that's when I started talking to people. That's one of the reasons why I ultimately chatted with you about, how can
Mm,
I be more cognizant of this stuff. And but now, it's pretty obvious to me at this point that you want to develop all those things because it just gives you more opportunities to do things. And you might be able to get by on that and get enough to keep you going, but I don't want to just get by. I want to be in a position where I can actually pick and choose, and maybe I can't do everything that's possible out there, but at least I want to be able to, have the ability if I want to or can to cherry pick on the things that are the most interesting or the most where I'm going to learn something or develop more skills that I can use later on.
I think it's a
And
great answer.
yeah, and so you want to do that. So you always want to keep all those doors open. And that's why I said that's why like the investment made years ago with all these young people that are now they're all senior people now. These guys and gals that used to be, they're, second year associate or whatever, and now they're, managing director with, 15 managing directors reporting to them, and then they're calling you up and saying, whatever. I mean, there's one guy I won't name, but he's a foreign national from a wealthy country in the Middle East. And he was a junior guy that came through, and they sent him for training for 6 months when I was running research at Merrill. I spent time with him every day
Mm,
for like 6 months, a little bit of time every day, whatever he needed, everything. And it's like, okay, maybe this guy's going to get somewhere. And now he runs one of the biggest sovereign wealth investment firms in the world. And then, I got a call out of the blue one day when I was working at another place, and they're like, this guy, we've been trying to get in charge ahead of for 10 years, and he found out you worked here and he called. And now we've got this multi-billion-dollar client. It's like, yeah, well, he remembers when I helped him out when nobody else would. Now he's big deal. so
mm.
so
That's a great
it,
example.
it's yeah, and it sometimes that happens. So you really want to, and that's the thing I think you've helped me recognize more clearly is there are all these channels out there that I used to underutilize. Now I utilize them, and maybe sometimes I feel like, well, maybe I'm a little too busy, but that's the position I want to be in. So,
Mm.
yeah. So,
What would
so for that, thank you.
Yeah, well, my pleasure. It's been fantastic working with you, Dan. I've really enjoyed it. I've also really enjoyed this conversation with you today. I guess I only have like one final question. There will probably be some repetition here because we covered a lot, but I'd be interested in just hearing what you think are the main benefits after us having worked together, or other than that immediate burst of cases and work. But what will you
I think
say?
it's just getting you have I have a lot of perspective that I already had, but you have a couple of extra ones, and I want to learn. You know, that's the thing is, if you can learn from almost everybody, and if somebody has something where they've developed, you know, you've got very good developed skills in networking and recognizing business development. And that's something I've just not focused on. And now I think about it more than I used to. So I'm more cognizant of things that I wasn't. I'm more aware of things. When I talk to somebody, I now think of like, you know, if I can help them with this, it will lead to this and this and this. And I'm thinking more from a business perspective as a, you know, sort of like, well, this can lead me to other leads or other things and other people and other tasks and maybe some things that I haven't done that I've been interested in doing, because I'm always interested in doing new things. You know, it was like, you know, like in the past, I've written several parts of books and book chapters and things like that. And I've seen people do that. And, you know, like a couple of years ago, one of them called me and said, you know, I know you've been doing all these financial books and things on securities and stuff like that, but I'm writing a crypto book and everybody loves this stuff, and but there are flaws, and I know you kind of know what some of those are. I want you to write about the potential downside here, the risks and where there are weaknesses, you know. And I'm like, and I know what they are, and I wrote about it now, you know. And I wrote this chapter for this book, and you know, on crypto. And then all of a sudden I get invited to do like lectures on like crypto and stuff. And I don't consider myself a crypto expert, but I know enough about it, and I know enough about where the risks and where the flaws are and the things to be careful of. Most people don't know. They just like, oh, this is great. There's a lot of ways to lose money there. There's a lot of ways to make money. You have to recognize what they are, and not everybody does that. So I can actually be helpful on that kind of stuff. Yeah.
All right. Well, Dan, I really enjoyed the conversation with you today. Like I said, it's been a pleasure working with you. Great to see that you have gotten, you know, results, but also, you know, we've had great interaction along the way.
And it's been useful for me, and to the extent that I can help, you know, with you, that's like, you know, that's why I said, you know, I'll do this whatever you want to call it, video podcast, whatever.
Yeah,
you know, it's fine because yeah, because maybe somebody will listen and maybe I'll say something that resonates with them, or put a thought in their head that helps them out. And you know, maybe not, but there might be something there that somebody can find of use. So it's like, okay, so it's out there, and maybe I'll get a couple phone calls. So, you know, and that could lead to something. So see, and you know, 6 months ago, I might not have thought of that. Say, okay, well, you know, I'm gonna help out, and you know, but now I think, well, you know, and I probably get some calls or whatever. At least people know, you know, some of the stuff I've done, and maybe they'll call, and maybe they just didn't know. Oh, didn't know there was a guy like you out there. Well, there's a guy that you might be able to help. So, you know, so it's not all completely virtuous, I guess, you know, because but I do see that there's always possibilities there, and the
definitely.
more you can do, the more you can help, and the more you learn on all this stuff. It's all good. So, you know, so this is just another step in that journey.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thanks very much, Dan.
Sure.
It was great speaking with you, and you know, you're still part of the program, so we'll
Yeah.
meet again. But I guess it's goodbye for now.
Okay. Thanks, Dan.
All right.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having me on.
Thanks.